it was said earlier that the procurement ombudsman did not find fraud. I would just say he also did not find pickles because that wasn't what he's looking for. His mandate isn't to lay criminal charges. I do expect criminal charges will be laid in relation to government procurement. We've already had one contractor's house raided, but time will tell. I did want to ask about the issue of money being paid back in relation to the Arrive scam scandal. Parliament passed a motion asking for money to be paid back. Christian Firth testified that no one had even asked him about returning money. Ms. Reza, have you had conversations with the minister about this? Is the minister seeking information or seeking processes to have that money paid back or not?
Thank you very much for the question. Restitution is something that we look at across various elements of ArriveCAN and other cases like we just described. We have had conversations. I've advised the minister that the issue is with legal, looking at the various approaches that can be dealt with and with the client whose budget it is. So I don't know if you have anything further, Karen.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, though, the House prescribed a timeline. Do you have a timeline? Clearly, it's not the House's timeline because the House's timeline has elapsed. Do you have a timeline on this from legal?
I'm going to ask Catherine, who's closer to
Thank you for the question. For the files being mentioned on overbilling, when there's a bill that clearly shows that there was overbilling by specific suppliers, it's possible for us.
The process. I want to know what is being done to get this money back in accordance with the House order. The time has elapsed on it. What is your timeline for reporting back, asking for the money, advising the House on next steps?
Thank you very much for the question. We'll have to come back with a written response in terms of Department of Justice and CBSA in terms of next steps for restitution for ArriveCAN.
Okay. There's not much more to be said except that I don't think that's acceptable. We'll wait for your written response. But the House passes a motion, prescribes a timeline, asking for the money to be asked for back, and we're well past that timeline, and we're hearing that essentially it's in the process of being studied. That's clearly not good enough. But we'll look for a response. Fundamentally, this is on the government for setting those expectations. Now, I was a bit. You were a bit ambiguous in your response on the particular aspect of favoritism in the McKinsey report from the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman found that favoritism was shown towards McKinsey. You seem to say that you agreed with the findings of the report, and yet also that you seem to not to be clear on whether you agreed with the finding of favoritism. Did the government show favoritism towards McKinsey?
Thank you very much for the question. So in terms of PSPC's position on findings and recommendations, we agreed with the Procurement Ombudsman's report. His conclusions, which is he himself has come here and spoken about the fact that he is making negative inferences, PSPC is a little bit more nuanced. We have found no examples of favoritism. These cases PSPC is not involved in. These, in 110, the 4 factors in terms of favoritism are based on many contracts of small value, and as a contract authority, as a common service provider, we haven't issued that many to be able to make the assessment that this is an accurate bias.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the evidence, he provides a report in which he demonstrates, I think, clearly the reasons why he came to the conclusion that favoritism was involved. Based on your reading of the report, do you agree that the government showed favoritism for McKinsey? Is there a recognition of that finding, or are you skeptical about that finding?
In terms of, thank you very much for the question. In terms of the conclusion, PSPC has also noted in a document that it doesn't have the same assumptions as the Procurement Ombudsman. I don't know if you'd like to add
Can we
anything?
just get a yay or nay, though? Like, do you accept the conclusion that favoritism was shown for McKinsey, or do you not? I mean, either position, would be a fair answer. But I just like to know, really, from the Deputy Minister, it's do you accept the findings, or do you not accept the findings?
I do not accept the findings, although PSPC is not impacted in it, so it's a little bit difficult.
I'm sorry, did you say you do not, or you do?
I do not accept that there is favoritism for McKinsey in the current system, based on our assessment as a common service provider.
Okay, so you're not accepting the conclusions of the report in this sense.
If you allow me to jump in.
No. I've got one more question to.
You have about 10 seconds, so make a very brief answer.
Okay. should McKinsey, because of their broader conduct, be on a blacklist? Why were they being contracted at all in light of all the things we know about their behavior, conflicts of interest around the world, human rights abuses, etc.?
I'm afraid you should have left it at a yes or no. I don't think we're going to have time for a fulsome. Perhaps you can get back to us in writing, though. Mr. Kuzmierczuk, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for being here with us today and providing us with some insights and shedding some light on the world of government procurement. We certainly have learned a lot over the last number of weeks. And again, knowing just the scale of procurement that takes place by the federal government, I think it's 300,000 contracts annually, is just a massive, massive amount of work. I wanted to ask Ms. Reza, my colleague had used the word collusion, and I know that you had taken exception to that word, and you were just about to, I think, speak to it a little bit, and why you took exception to that word, and I think you ran out of time, if I'm not mistaken. So I just wanted to give you the floor, and just to speak about again, favoritism and also collusion in procurement.
Thank you very much for allowing me to follow up, because we did want to come back and talk about what we're doing for measures of collusion to ensure that the procurement system has an integrity. But I think it's worthwhile to circle back to the issue that we just went with in terms of the findings and recommendations as it relates to favoritism. At PSPC, we look at the Procurement Ombudsman report and we look across it to see how we can best apply it, how we can best put in best practices, and how we can adjust. So in terms of this particular element, it's difficult for us because we do hundreds of thousands of contracts, and we need to be able to assess the broader bidder pool. So for example, how many times did McKinsey compete? To be able to assess, was there favoritism? Is this structured on these very modest contracts? And we have to look at the contract value to see whether or not, when they were sole sourced, it exceeded what they competed for. There's a lot of different assumptions that we need to unpack and work with the procurement ombudsman. So I'm a little bit, the favoritism, while PSPC as a common service provider was not implicated in the findings, there's one small contract, I do want to be able to give a thoughtful response and make sure that, we're not offside, because there are so many recommendations and best practices here. Je vais me tourner.
Yeah, thank you. And also, when you look at, for instance, from my standpoint, is that you need to look, is there positive, concrete evidence that would demonstrate that PSPC did favor McKinsey over another supplier? And, I know that the ombuds draw some negative inference for the lack of information, but I think when we drill down at PSPC contract, we cannot accept the fact that there is evidence that would show that, there was a preferential treatment that was afforded to McKinsey. There's no such evidence on file.
One of the things we heard is that today is that PSPC, for example, or the procurement officers work together. There's an iterative process, a back and forth process at times between the procurement officers and the vendors. Can you just explain why that is appropriate to have that sort of exchange back and forth between the procurement officers and the vendors?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the procurement ombudsman also spoke about this in terms of having industry participation, because we have to make sure we're shaping a solicitation that is not too restrictive, that is encouraging open competition. So we need to have the dialogue with the supplier base to see, is this doable? Are the timelines going to be met? So there is a certain level of back and forth as the strategy is being shaped. And once we move into a solicitation phase, it becomes a much more gated, transparent element of the process where that continuum has changed and it's a more formal response. But Molly?
Thank you for the question. And I think what I would add here is that when looking at the types of contracting that was done in the instance of McKinsey, you have the full range in the sense that we've used supply arrangements, standing offer, as well as competitive processes and sole source. So in each of those instances, there would be a different type of engagement with the industry members that would have been competing. So for instance, for the large value contracts, we would have had a open process that We would have had a fairness monitor. We would have had others that would be involved to make sure that open, fair, transparent. In certain other circumstances, such as a low dollar value contract, it's completely appropriate for us to deal directly with the supplier to negotiate the best possible price and to work through that together. It's a negotiation process. So it really is on a spectrum, and there are very clear guidelines and frameworks that are used for that type of industry engagement. And as the Deputy Minister has indicated, it's encouraged that we engage with our supplier community, and it's something that we take very seriously to ensure it's done professionally. And that's something we also work with our client departments on, who are the technical authorities. They're the ones responsible for defining the actual requirements of an individual contract. So it's very important that they also be involved in this and respect the integrity of the process. So that's something that our procurement officers work very hard to do as well.
Ms. Reza, over a year ago, in fact, February 22nd, 2023, this committee received a letter from your Assistant DM, Policy Planning and Communications, Mr. Irecci, concluding a first tranche of documents that had been ordered by this committee. In that letter, your department promised that there would be more documents to come and promised that a second tranche would arrive well over a year ago, March the 3rd, 2023. Who directed your department not to provide these documents to the committee within that time frame?
Thank you very much for the question. I believe that the work is still underway. There's about 20 to 40,000 pages that need to be translated and collated, and the minimum redactions being done. I do believe they're on their way to you.
And you didn't see fit to update this committee?
I apologize. I should have started with that.
Okay. Can we have another tranche of documents delivered to this committee within 3 weeks?
I will do my utmost to do that, yes.
Okay. You referred 3 IT companies to the RCMP regarding fraudulent contracting, a value of close to $5 million with a time frame of 2018 to 2022. Who are they?
Thank you very much for the question. Just for precision, they're actual resources. So they're the consultants or the IT specialists that...
Yeah, but who are they?
I'm going to have to turn to Madame Poulin, who has the oversight.
Madame Poulin?
Merci
Identity, please.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. As the Deputy Minister said, these are individuals. They were the ones who were referred to the RCMP to maintain the integrity of the RCMP. We cannot provide the names of those resources. Thank you.
Is subject to an RCMP investigation, and an argument could have been made that we are preserving their integrity. There's still a presumption of innocence. People get identified every single day in this country when they're charged with a criminal offense. I'll ask you again, will you identify those 3 IT companies that have been referred to the RCMP?
Consult internally, and we'll see what we can do in order to provide those names.
Can you provide some context as to the size of those companies? We know at this point, GC Strategies, a small 2-person company, fleecing Canadian taxpayers for close to $60 million, all the way now to McKinsey, the largest strategy consulting firm in the world with 30,000 consultants across 65 countries. Again, potentially under RCMP investigation. So what are the sizes of the companies under investigation now?
Si vous permettez, je vais commencer. Let me just start, just for clarity. These are individuals. So how this came to light is that there would be maybe an individual working for 2 different companies and charging the Crown for the same time. So it's not really about the companies at this time, it's about the individual consultants working. So those names have been referred to the RCMP for criminal proceedings. And I'm going to stop here and swivel for a moment.
Okay. About a month ago, we heard from your minister, Duclos, and Minister Anand, that this was only the first tranche of potential fraudulent activity against the Canadian taxpayer. How many waves, how many tranches can the Canadian public expect to hear about?
Thank you for the question. Let me start. First off, this is a new data analytical capacity.
I'm not concerned about that, Ms. Reza. Ms. Reza, the question is very specific. How many other tranches, how many other waves of further criminal investigations can we expect? We got the impression from your minister and Minister Anand that there was going to be a review of all the contractors who have been potentially subject to investigations by the RCMP, investigations by the Auditor General. We know that there's 635 similar IT middlemen operating in the same capacity as GC Strategies. Are all of those 635 IT middlemen being investigated for potential fraudulent activities?
Thank you for the question. The investigations are targeting individuals who are awarded several contracts in different firms. At the end of March, we also announced that we are stepping up data analysis. It is likely that we may obtain other results concerning individuals, consultants that are recruited by prime contractors and can bill the federal government for work on many or multiple contracts.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shawari,
Point of order,
please.
Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Genuis?
Yeah, Chair, during Mr. Brock's round of questions, he put a very direct question to the witness regarding the names of companies. The witness indicated that she didn't want to provide an answer. That's lovely, but we are a parliamentary committee and we have a history of using the tools that the House provides us with to insist on answers. So I would, in respect of those rules, like you to put the question to the witness, Chair, with the witness understanding that we expect an answer on the question in order to not be in contempt of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. And it's a good point. Colleagues, this is the exact same issue we had with Mr. Firth, where very clear direct answers or questions were put, and he refused to answer. And I'm not saying we're going down the same path as Mr. Firth, but a very clear question was provided, and I think the committee deserves a very clear answer. If you are going to provide it to us in writing, the name of the resources, that will be acceptable to us, I think, the committee.
Je répète ma réponse. Je vais consulter.
Let me repeat, I carried out internal consultations and we did everything we could while respecting legal requirements and privacy requirements to provide names to the committee. It's not that we don't want to answer.
There, I'm sorry, but we've been through this repeatedly. We've had the law clerk with us. Sorry, Mr. Genuis, I have the floor. We've been through this repeatedly with various departments, yourself included. This committee and Parliament supersedes privacy law. It was a very clear question. We would just like, again, I think it was 3 resources you mentioned, 3 companies. I think after everything we've seen with GC and this report, I think it's fair to ask that you do provide it to us so we can avoid perhaps the issue Mr. Genuis was referring to. Can you do that for us, Ms. Reza?
I certainly can. I just want to add a footnote to this. I believe that there's a production order, and this is probably part of the hesitancy, so we will come back with the names, understanding that.
Okay.
Sorry, point of order.
No, let me.
Okay.
I think the question is pretty clear, and my request is that this is provided. I don't think we wish it would be part of the production order. If you could provide it separately, as has been requested by Mr. Brock, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
So I apologize. I'm saying that those names are under a production order right now for the RCMP, but we're going to come back to you. I wasn't proposing anything else. Thank you.
When can we get that information then, please?
Well, we'll try over the next few days to see exactly what the assessment is and provide it as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Genuis. Mr. Brock has the floor.
Again, I don't believe the Deputy Minister truly appreciates the role of parliamentary committees. As the Chair has indicated, privacy is trumped by this committee. The fact that you've received a production order by the RCMP for the identity of those 3 sources does not in any way allow you to prevent this committee from receiving those names. There is no legal impediment for you to deliver those names to this committee. The issue of privacy is not relevant. And as I've indicated already, every single person.
Mr. Brock, I'm just going to interrupt you there.
Yes.
I think I've been clear. We'll say by Friday, please provide this information as been requested by Mr. Brock and provided in writing to our clerk.
Point of order, Chair. Are the witnesses committing to provide that information or to come back with some further thoughts on whether or
They will provide the
not?
information that Mr. Brock has requested by this Friday.
The committee agrees to that, to require that. Okay, good.
Wonderful.
Comment, like, and subscribe, and join if you can. You've been served.